Good evening, everyone. I'm Cory Gerlach, Superintendent of Schools. We're going to go over a presentation and do a Q&A to our model of the issues that we're seeing and the approach that we're likely going to take. And I'm supposed to be looking at the owl again. I'm sorry. We're going to start with some brief intro, starting with Cory.
Good evening. I'm Cory Hirsbrunner, Assistant Superintendent and Director of Elementary Education.
Hello, my name is Connie Negaard, and I'm the Director of Secondary Education.
Brian Casey, Director of Technology. I'm going to moderate the questions on chat. That is the way to ask questions of our panel tonight. So please submit the questions. I'll do the best to field those questions. Please understand we're not possibly able to answer every question tonight. We are recording this. We will have a documentation of that and attempt to answer all questions as best as possible.
Thank you. We started planning for the beginning of school back last spring. Actually, when the state shut down, we spent a tremendous amount of time throughout the summer creating plans, working with individuals, bouncing ideas off one another, and of course getting approval from our school board to begin school in the fall. We did have a successful summer school. Well, granted, it was relatively low in numbers for the obvious. However, it did go well. And we started back in school in September. We did delay our start knowing that we would be best served with as much time as possible to prepare, quite frankly, for the unknown and get all of our safety measures in place. We did provide a number of opportunities. We are providing another number of opportunities for students as it relates to in-person blended learning as well as our online learning center. And we were very excited, and we are very excited and proud of the fact that we were able to offer those options. That said, we are having a difficult time right now maintaining and sustaining the options that we started with. And it really at this point comes down to staffing our buildings as it relates to the need for substitutes, whether they're teaching assistants or whether they're teachers. On any given day, our buildings or our district on average has a 21% rate of staff that go unfilled each day. And as that number continues, it becomes much more challenging to offer the educational programming, not only in a safe way, but one that provides for good teaching and learning. So we're taking a step back and taking a look at what we're doing and proposing a change in our model. This evening, Cory will be going over, as well as Connie, the model itself, and then we're going to open up and would like to spend the majority of our time on Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. So I'm going to quickly go through a PowerPoint that gives you just a little bit more information about what we're thinking. Some of you may have seen this already, so I apologize if you have, but I know that there's others who haven't. So I think it's really good for us to give you the foundation of where we're at and then open it up for questions after that. So at the core of our decision-making process since last March, basically, has been our commitments to safety for both students and staff, providing flexibility within our educational model, because we know at any time we may have to pivot and shift gears and go a different direction, as well as instruction. We are obligated and committed to providing the best possible educational opportunities that we can for students. So that continues to be at the core of what we're focused on. I think it's really important to mention that our families have done a tremendous job of keeping kids out of school when they're not feeling well, following the district COVID protocols as well as protocols from the county. So thank you very much for that. Everyone has been phenomenal to work with, and we appreciate all that families have done. The other piece is staff have done a phenomenal job making sure that they're also following our district protocols and suggestions that we've had for them within the classroom and within the buildings. So what are our current trends and what is our capacity currently? We're monitoring what's happening in the county. We're monitoring what's happening in the state, as well as within the district. And what we're finding is, while the trends are increasing in all three of those areas, the district continues to remain a little bit behind both the state and the county. So we feel like what we've implemented with our protocols seem to be going very well. And what we're doing is working as best as possible in that regard. There has been some recent changes in how the county has been able to do their contact tracing. It's hard to keep up with all the numbers that are coming in, but we've been working in collaboration with them. And then we also know that there was just some recent guidance from the CDC. So we're continuing to monitor all of that information that comes our way. Our sub rate, right now, if we have 100 subs out on any given day, at this point in time, we've only been able to fill those at 79%. So we're having some unfilled positions, and we're having to pull different staff to help monitor those areas where there might be a sub shortage. So we're continuing to monitor that number, and it's going down each time we take a peek at that. We have had to have Roosevelt close for 2 weeks, and they're in the middle of that right now. And we're anticipating with the cold and the flu season coming up, we're likely going to have more school closures if we continue to not have the capacity to keep staff in front of our kids. And it will not change. Our current instructional models, here's what we have right now, our pre-K through 6, which pre-K means our special ed 3-year-old programs. We've got 4K, and we've got some regular ed 3-year-old programs through grade 6. We have about 80% of our students in person currently. We have about 17% in our flexible e-learning. In grade 7-12, we've got about 78% in person, and we have about 20% in the flexible e-learning. And then the online learning center is the decision that families made at the beginning of the year to remain virtual all year, and that is at about 2.5%. What's working really well, we're about 8 weeks in, and we've got the traditional and the blended model. And what we've learned is that student achievement is the best right now. After we're looking at some of our grades of students and assessments, we're finding that student achievement is highest for the people that are here in person in the cohort model, as well as at the elementary level. We also have 79% of our student population that is actually here in person. So the majority of our kids are here in a face-to-face environment. What we're concerned about right now, and what we don't see working as well as we had anticipated, is the capacity for staff to do both face-to-face instruction as well as flexible e-learning. Staff are finding it very, very difficult to meet the needs of all students when they've got students in 2 different areas. They're doing a very good job. They're trying their very, very best to meet all of those needs, but it's getting more and more difficult as the year progresses. What's also not working is that the students that are in that flexible model seem to be struggling the most. And that's a concern of ours, and that's something that we've been monitoring from the very start. And we also know that this is impacting our budget, and it's impacting the allocation of staff district-wide. Next slide, please. So we're concerned about the capacity of our staff, and we feel like at this point we need to make a shift and pivot into a different direction. How do we plan to do that? At the pre-K-6 level, what we're thinking will help with this situation is to actually dedicate some staff to do just the flexible e-learning. So we would have some staff that would do face-to-face, and then we'd have other staff that would be dedicated for just the flex e-learning. What we would do at the elementary level, K-6, is we would collapse a grade level district-wide. So we'd take 1 kindergarten teacher, 1 first grade teacher, 1 second grade teacher, all the way through 6th grade, We would take an educational assistant and a floating sub so that there would be a team of 3 for each grade level, and those individuals would be responsible for all of the flex e-learning lessons. For pre-K, we would also have a designated staff member that would be creating those flexible e-learning lessons for those early learners. What would this look like? We would pivot to all elementary kids would be in an e-learning environment from November 30th to December 23rd. We would take the time then to identify, based on capacity and enrollment, which school and which grade level we're going to collapse. We'd create a plan to make sure that staff were well informed, students and families were informed, and knew exactly what that transition would look like. And then we would return after the holiday break, January 4th, into our new model. The rationale for the pre-K 6 pivot at this time is safety. We feel that this is really going to reduce the likelihood of short and long-term closures due to the upcoming cold and flu season. It allows for some flexibility. It allows for parents to have an option. What are they going to do, or what do they want their children to do for the remainder of the year? And it also provides us the time to work with our community partners and like the Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA, as well as district personnel, to create some homework clubs and some childcare satellites that would help families that might be struggling to find childcare or support for their students with needs during that 3-week of all e-learning. This would also allow staff that are dedicated to in-person to focus on in-person, and staff that are dedicated to e-learning focus on e-learning. 7-12, what we would talk about here is that e-learners would return to the blended cohort model, or they would apply to the online learning center. What that would look like for 7-12 is, again, similar to elementary, November 30th to December 23rd, everyone would be e-learning. This would provide us the opportunity to really work on a communication plan to make sure our students and our families knew exactly what that plan was going to look like. We would complete the application process for those that are applying to the online learning center, and then we would resume in the blended learning model through the end of the first semester, and then starting the second semester, which is January 25th, that's when then secondary would have the option of the online learning center or the cohort model, where it's 2 days in person and 3 days e-learning. The rationale for this, some is very similar to the elementary. We're anticipating that this would reduce the likelihood of short and long-term closures. It would provide time for families to make decisions on, what's best for their students and what's best for their families at this time. It would allow teachers to focus on really giving attention to that instructional piece that we feel would benefit students and their achievement and their growth opportunities. And we're thinking that student achievement for flexible e-learnings at mid-quarter was quite alarming, and we're hoping that with this change, we're going to see our student achievement data increase. Additional considerations. We know that this is a pivot. We have some desires that we hope to attain from this new plan, but of course there's things that we just don't quite know about, but we need to keep in the back of our mind and consider as we move forward. So we feel a benefit would be that this would provide an appropriate workload for staff to better meet the needs of students. It would maximize engagement, achievement, and growth for students. It would be a response to what we're hearing from families, what we're hearing from students, and what we're hearing from staff. It would hopefully address the cold and flu season. It would hopefully address some of the climate issues that we see, the teacher burnout that's happening within our buildings right now. And it would provide for more synchronous opportunities, which staff have indicated is helpful for students, which students have said they need, and families said that students need. Some concerns that we have that we need to think about is, what are we going to do with our support staff? If we're all e-learning in November and December, the holiday time, what are we going to be doing with our bus drivers and our food service personnel and our EAs? We want to keep those people working as much as we can, and we definitely have work to do for them, but it's going to look very different than it is currently. This will place an additional burden on families because everyone will be e-learning for that 3 weeks, and we need to be aware of that, and we need to address that the very best that we can. We also need to make sure that we're providing those services for students with 504s or IEPs, and that process has already started with our student services staffing. We know that there might be some loss of engagement. We need to keep an eye on that and make sure that our students are staying engaged as much as they possibly can. It could, present the need for some families to say, this just doesn't meet my needs. I might not be able to have the choice that I want, and that could potentially result in a decrease of enrollment. We're hoping that that's not the case, but again, we need to be aware of that. We need to make sure that we're watching that. It will potentially or could potentially have a financial impact, and our business manager, Tom Owens, is always watching our budget, and he will continue to do so throughout this operational plan. And then we need to continually monitor how's our staff doing, how resilient are they, and what does this new pivot mean for our staff and our movement forward. With that, there's obviously a schedule change. So the schedule would look a little bit different. And the last slide here, I'm gonna talk about what that schedule looks like. So between now and November 25th, we would continue to maintain where we're currently at with our instructional model. We would work to communicate with families and staff and students about the upcoming change. And then we would start working on that application process for the Online Learning Center. From November 30th to December 23rd, all of our students, pre-K through 12, would be e-learning. We would collapse those sections, and we would talk to those staff members. We'd ask for volunteers, and then in hopes that we would get volunteers that are interested in doing the e-learning. We've already had some people indicate that they are, and if we don't find those, then we would reassign some of our staff to do that. We'd work on creating those homework centers and child care support centers. And then we are asking that every one of our staff members work from the buildings during that 3-week time while they're doing the e-learning lessons. Starting January 4th, pre-K through 6 students would come back in person or in that flex model. And at this point in time, we are talking about coming back 5 days a week. However, quite honestly, there's been some discussion about if that is something that we should do right now based on our numbers and, heading into that cold and flu season. So we're continuing to have discussion and monitor that 5 days a week. Some people think it's a really good thing to do and some people don't. So that quite honestly, I feel like I need to share that information. We would transition students to return to that in-person time, and then students that are electing to remain in that flexible environment would stay there for the remainder of the year. So we would ask families, what is your choice for the second half of the year? Are you interested in in-person or are you interested in a face-to-face? January 4th for secondary, we would stay in our blended model right now. And then we would, at semester time, January 25th, we would flip then to all secondary students would either be in their cohort or they would apply to the Online Learning Center. So that was a lot of information in a short amount of time, but we really know that the majority of people have probably seen this, so we ran through it quickly and we wanted to allocate the majority of our time with you tonight to really answer those specific questions that you have. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian Casey and he's going to go through the questions.
Okay, thank you, Cory. As I said before, we have a lot of questions that have been submitted. We're going to do our best to field all those questions I'll just let everyone know, I may take some liberty to paraphrase longer questions, and we'll try and group them into similar topics so that we address everyone's concerns. If your question is not answered, please feel free to reach out to one of the panelists here, building principals, who want to get your questions answered. The first question we received was a question about how the teachers would be selected for this e-learning program that would take place for K-6 students.
So what we would do is we are going to determine at what school and what grade level based on enrollment and capacity. Once that's determined, we would then go to those grade level teachers and ask for a volunteer. Like I said, there are some people who have already volunteered to do that. If we don't get volunteers, we would then reassign people to e-learning. And we would probably pick people who are comfortable with that and people that are doing a pretty good job with that. But again, we're hopeful that people that choose to do it would jump in first, and we have a good selection of volunteers to pick from.
Had several questions regarding the change and how that would affect students who are in e-learning and finding success, or they finally fit into a pattern and some stability. How would this change affect them? And can you elaborate a little bit more on that? It's
our hope that it will actually get better. I mean, I know it takes a little bit of time for kids to get in that routine, and they finally in their groove. I understand that. But we really think that once we have dedicated staff to focus on those flex e-learners, that it's going to get even better. There will likely be more opportunity for some live synchronous sessions. We're going to create a daily schedule so that there's expectations. Families know exactly what that expectation is for the day and approximately how many minutes they should be working on, literacy instruction, how many minutes they should be working on math instruction. We're hoping that there's more opportunity for dialogue between students and teachers and families. And again, we really think that it's going to be better for students because teachers will have the opportunity to focus on just that one instructional model.
Can we talk a little bit about the timing, about the return to 5 days a week for K-6 and then the return to the cohort model 2 days a week for secondary? Why was it determined that we would start January 4th? Several parents have asked, would it make sense to extend that time past New Year's and the holidays?
Absolutely. Honestly, when we started this discussion, we were at January 25th. We were talking about the need to go through the end of the first semester. And then after input, from staff, after input from, families, we're getting emails often from people. And the community, we were concerned that families weren't going to be able to find childcare and families weren't going to be able to support their kids in that environment for that long period of time. So we moved back a few weeks and decided let's start with January 4th rather than the 25th. The other piece was we felt like, if we go to e-learning and then we come back January 4th and, we pivot into what we're currently doing now and then pivot again January 25th, it's a lot of transition and movement, and we just didn't think that was best for students.
It's also an attempt to limit the number of days off school. I hear from both sides loud and clear in terms of why aren't we 100% virtual in the first place, and we should move to 100% virtual. And I hear from those saying we should be in school 5 days a week without masks. And I've got childcare problems. So we're really trying to limit the disruptions to families as it relates to childcare. Now, I understand that coming back after the holidays could be a time where we have a spike in the whole COVID tracing process. And we'll have to deal with that, at that particular point in time. But, we're looking at a substantial time off school where we're putting parents in a very difficult situation as it relates to childcare.
Question regarding the 23rd and 24th. Can we clarify what those days will mean under the new plan?
November?
Yes.
Those days will remain as we had planned. So November 23rd and November 24th are going to be catch-up days for students. And then staff are using those days for collaboration and preparation.
Seen several questions come in, and this is a question primarily for Connie. Regarding, the original attempt with Flex e-learning was to allow students to take a variety of courses at SPASH or the junior highs, allow that flexibility. What's that going to look like when the option is only the OLC, the breadth of courses, especially advanced courses for students?
And I know this is a concern with several parents. So when we started setting up our reopening plan, our primary goal was safety. So we knew at a secondary level, the first step is we had to cut our population in half in order to distance in the classroom. So we created these, the cohorts. We also wanted to be really, really responsive to parents who were still nervous about sending their kids back to the buildings. And so we created the flexible e-learning model. We knew that kids wanted their SPASH, then PJ schedule. We knew they wanted their SPASH teachers. And so that's why we said we can hold off on having kids back in the building if parents are nervous about that or students have medical needs that do not allow them to come back into the building. And that's how we created those cohorts. It was always intended and still that parents would decide by order. We thought that if we found that kids were safe, and we've done a pretty good job in our secondary schools. The kids have been great wearing masks, they're distancing, and our number of cases is far lower than what's happening around us in the community. And so we thought that more parents would then say, yep, we're gonna come back into that cohort. That hasn't necessarily happened, and I understand the concern of us not being able to match every single class at SPASH, Ben, or PJ in our OLC. But we have a really good course offering. So for parents who are still concerned and do not want to come back into the buildings for the entire year, we have many courses in the OLC. We can't match all of them, but we do have from now until semester to do our very best. We have 34 local teachers within our secondary that teach in the OLC. So they're using our local curriculum and they're taught by our local teachers. And that's pretty impressive. And I think that number is going to grow because you're going to find more teachers who want to continue to offer our curriculum to students in the OLC. So right now we're looking that we can accommodate about 200 teachers or 200 students, but we're going to have to see where those numbers come in. And if they're more, we'll do whatever we can to increase the enrollment.
Hey, the next question concerns Wednesdays. The K-6 plan goes to 5 days a week. What happens on Wednesdays? Because originally that was a deep cleaning day. Why the change?
Yeah, so the thought behind the Wednesdays was, number one, our intent has always been to try to get kids back in person as much as possible. And then if we dedicate staff for just the flexible e-learning, that Wednesday was given to staff to do the planning and the prep for that flex e-learning if they were doing in-person teaching as well. So if we pull teachers to do the flex e-learning, the plan was then we wouldn't need the Wednesdays for planning and preparation and collaboration. Now, the deep cleaning question comes up. We're going to have to alter that. If we come back 5 days a week, we're likely going to have to do that on the nights. We're going to have to shift our cleaning assignments and rotations and make sure that we get those done, just not on Wednesdays.
The plan all along is to get the kids back in school. We need to eventually get our students all back in school. I'm not sure when that's going to happen. We likely will continue to make changes throughout the course of the year. The next question, and again, it's all about numbers and safety and where we sit as a state and as a county. But eventually the goal is to get our secondary students back to school 5 days a week. In an ideal situation, we finish the school year where we are all back 5 days a week. Whether or not we'll accomplish that is yet to be seen. But we need to continue focusing on getting back kids back in school because I firmly believe that kids will learn better as well as have all of the other issues as it relates to mental health and socio-emotional needs will be better met when we're back in school. So this is an attempt to continue moving forward and getting back into school completely.
Okay. Next question revolves around synchronous instruction. Many parents may know that as Zoom classes, I think that's what it's commonly referred to, is the idea that there is a live video broadcast of teaching that's going on with students watching it. So what is the plan for us in the month period of virtual instruction, and what might that look like moving forward?
At the secondary level, we are in the process right now of creating a schedule from November through December 23rd, when students are all e-learning, where there is actually going to be scheduled synchronous sessions with students and teachers. And so we're working on that right now and plan to get that out. So it is going to involve, it's an attempt to connect and engage our students. We've been concerned about the student achievement from our e-learners. We know from last spring, from teachers and from kids and from families, that they believe there needs to be more synchronous. So we are responding to that, and we're going to be doing that over that 3-week period.
Can we clarify what the homework center / childcare support, when that information might be available to parents prior to when we start? We know.
We're working right now, and literally meeting tomorrow with the YMCA and the Boys and Girls Club. They are very interested in helping us to develop some satellite childcare centers so we can respond to community needs for childcare, respond to staff. As we have synchronous sessions, we're going to need to have our staff available to do those, and they have childcare issues as well. So we are responding to that and meeting to work with, to have a couple more satellite childcare centers in our elementary schools.
We got a couple of questions from parents trying to understand what it means when we say 20% of a grade level, or one teacher, one aide, one sub. So how are those teachers going to be polled? And then will students still have contact with other students? What does that look like?
Yep. So basically, there's approximately 80, that's on average, students per grade level district-wide that have chosen right now to do flex e-learning. We're analyzing the numbers for, that was first quarter. We're analyzing the numbers right now for second quarter. There might be a few more kids coming back to in-person, but very minimal. So we would have about 80 students, and we would have one teacher at that grade level, and then we would have an educational assistant as well as a floating sub. And how we foresee this working is the teacher would be creating the lessons, doing some synchronous sessions online, some asynchronous sessions online, and then the EA and the floating sub would be able to still provide those paper, packets and hands-on type materials, because we found that those have been really successful for students and parents like those, as well as they would be making contacts with kids as well to keep them engaged, check-ins, make sure they're doing okay. Do they need any help and support? And then we also have students that struggle and need even additional support. So that floating sub and that EA would be there to provide support. So that would then now be your cohort of students at your grade level. I know families are really, really concerned about maybe moving that direction because they don't want to lose the tie with their home attendance school. And our intent is not to take families, out of their home attendance school. Those kids will still be part of their elementary school. They will still be part of the yearbook. They will still, once COVID is over, those kids will go back to their home attendance school. So basically, it's just a much more efficient way to meet the needs of kids and hopefully increase engagement and achievement.
What are our plans for band, choir, and orchestra for those students as we move into the next phase?
As I mentioned before, we are going to look at our numbers and what students want through an online learning center and see if we have some local teachers that would be interested in teaching through the online learning center to continue studying music.
I have a question from a parent regarding student achievement. If it's lower in flexi learning, do we have concerns about moving the district onto a model for a month, especially for elementary students?
We've had a concern last spring, and we have a concern this fall. Even students that are in a blended model are still learning online 3 days a week. And so we're concerned with that overall, as is our districts all over the country. We're seeing that kind of decrease in student achievement. However, knowing what we know, and we have data of years to show the kind of absentee that happens between Thanksgiving and Christmas with the cold and flu season, that if we have so many students that are coming down into our health offices with symptoms, we'll probably have to assume they're COVID. And we will have so many students that are out of the building anyway. So yes, we always have a concern for student achievement, but be able to keep our kids healthy and our staff healthy to continue this model, I think is really important during that cold and flu season.
We have to do something. The reality is we're concerned about every decision we're making right now. If we don't do something, we won't make it till Thanksgiving because we won't be able to staff our buildings, and we're all going to be back e-learning at the end of the day. So it's a risk that we're going to take, we're willing to take. It's taking a step backward, take 2 steps forward, I guess is the best way I can explain that.
You touched on something, Connie, before about quarantine, and this came up with the teacher discussion as well. What happens to students moving forward as we shift into a new model and those students are forced to quarantine for 2 weeks? Are they e-learning? Are they on the OLC? What do we do with those students?
So here's where we're at with at the elementary level. If a student is an in-person student and they have to quarantine for 2 weeks, the teacher that's responsible for in-person teaching would be their instructor while they're in quarantine. We're going to, as elementary leadership team and instructional leaders, determine what quarantined instruction might look like. Again, setting those expectations and providing families with some online resources and lessons as well as paper pencil. But again, we have to remember that every student that's quarantined isn't even able to do the work in some cases because they're not feeling well. So it's similar to if a child were to take a vacation for a week or two, that teacher would still be providing opportunities for them to continue learning and practicing their skills. We wouldn't shift them over to the OLC, or we wouldn't shift them over to the flexi learning teacher.
When we do this collapsing at a grade level, how are we going to maintain social distancing?
So the grade level in school where we collapse, we've done that based on enrollment in those sections. So we are thinking that there would be, a few kids that would be dispersed to those other sections, but not too many kids so that we wouldn't be able to appropriately distance students within the classrooms. And we again may have to make some adjustments and shift some rooms around like we have been doing all year just based on numbers.
Can we talk about any district policies or rules regarding student travel over the holidays, and if there many businesses that enforce that? And there's a question from a parent about what that would look like if they decide to travel over the holidays.
We're in communication with Portage County. I was talking with Gary Garsky an hour before this meeting. We will continue to discuss that in terms of what travel looks like. What's interesting, right now, we're as bad as anywhere else. So I'm not convinced if you travel anywhere, the issue is going to be any different in terms of a requirement for quarantine. There were some, in the beginning, requirements from the county that if you left the county, that you would have to quarantine. And that's been fluid back and forth. So we are going to get some more direction from the county as it relates to that. Knowing that it's extremely difficult to oversee that and to police that. But at the end of the day, Portage County is as bad as it is in Chicago. So there's an argument if you travel to Chicago over the holidays or or travel to Wisconsin Rapids, it might not make any difference. So we will get some more feedback to not only families, but to our staff as well as it relates to what our expectations are. Obviously, we're concerned about the continued spread over the next couple of weeks, but then let's take a look at what's down the road. I think we're all aware of how popular Wisconsin is as it relates to deer hunting and the activities and the gatherings, followed by Thanksgiving and then Christmas. So, you know, we can only go on what we're hearing, and of course, depending on what channel you're listening to, there's questions of whether or not you believe what you're hearing. But at the end of the day, it certainly appears our numbers are increasing, and it looks like they will increase over the next couple of weeks and over the next month. So we will get more information on travel and what requirements are related to quarantines soon, prior to the holidays, obviously, and hopefully prior to people making decisions, because I know people are making decisions. If I do this and I have to quarantine, maybe that's not the best thing to do. I could say this comfortably. I think if the less people move around and the less group gatherings, the better we're all going to be. That's my 2 cents for advice.
I'm synthesizing several questions here, but they're all in the same vein. What is our capacity for the online program? And is there a process and a limit to where we would say we're full, we can't take any more online, either at the secondary or the elementary level?
At the secondary, we're anticipating that we can accommodate 200 students. But again, as our capacity for teachers that are interested in teaching in an online center increases, so will our ability to accept more students. We will have an application process. We will make sure that we take care of any students with medical needs that would require them to not be in the building, as well as any other special learning needs that we might need to make sure that we accommodate them through the online learning center. But again, it's going to depend on when we hear from families about wanting that option. And right now we're waiting to see how many students we're going to come back second quarter, because we've shown that being in the building, 2 things, that it's been very safe, and our students are achieving at higher rates in that blended model.
For the elementary, right now we're interviewing or asking families to fill out a survey for second quarter. Our intent is to have them fill that out again for the remainder of the year once they know what our model is going to look like. And then we'll analyze those numbers. If they're too high, we'll have to address that. But if they're okay, we'll move forward with the plan to have the cohort of 3 teachers. We believe that kids are going to learn best most kids are going to learn best in a face-to-face environment. But if more choose to go to e-learning, that solves another problem with not as many kids in the buildings, and you're able to social distance. So it's a balance, and we'll monitor and adjust as we need to.
For parents that sign up their children for online learning third quarter, do they have any options to return to the classroom at quarter time, or is it a commitment for the entire year?
So right now they just signed up for second quarter. So what we'll do is we'll ask them sometime during second quarter in the next few weeks, once everybody hears about this plan and has some time to process it and then digest it, we'll say, what is your intent for the remainder of the year, and give families that option.
From a secondary perspective, second semester, we're going to ask our families to choose either the blended model or the online learning center. When students enter into those courses and they're credit-based courses, it's very difficult for kids to flop back and forth. So we are going to ask for that commitment that semester.
A specific question from a parent. You guys have mentioned a survey. Where will it be located, and when is it coming out for the parent survey? It
hasn't been decided yet. It will go out, but honestly, we haven't decided when it will go out.
Very specific question, but I think it's important, especially for secondary parents. How will testing occur while students are all virtual for 3 weeks?
That's an excellent question. We know right now that the state says that we are still moving forward with our state assessment system. They have changed some dates on some testing. If we do continue with our state assessment, it will have to be on a virtual, in a virtual model.
Sorry, I skipped around. I'm trying to find my train of thought here again.
I'm sorry, I was going to mention, and if that question was pertaining to the ACT, the information that we have right now that the ACT is not to be delivered virtually, so then we would make accommodations like we did last spring for kids to come in and take that ACT safely.
Can we clarify what happens to the flexible e-learners during this period where everyone's virtual? What are they doing at that particular time? Are they doing the same thing with their class? And are they returning January 4th then?
So during that 3-week time, their teacher that they have right now would be still providing those e-learning lessons for the students during that 3 weeks. And then once they come back in January, that's when we would make that shift to the new flexible e-learning teacher. And we would work with families and staff and students to make that transition from their current teacher to their new teacher. So that would happen sometime in December.
We've had several questions from parents that are concerned about the transition for their children. They've created a bond with the current teacher in a flexi learning situation, and now we're asking them to move to a new teacher again. What were our considerations with this plan and that factor?
Really, it came down to we feel that if teachers have just the focus on one instructional model rather than two, it's going to be better for kids, and they'll have more time to focus on instruction for those students in whatever model they're delivering. It's a capacity issue, really. Teachers are just right now really struggling with, if they've got students in their classroom, if they've got 15 kids in their classroom during the day, and you've got another group of 10 that are e-learning and they need help and support and they need synchronous sessions, they're not able to provide that because they're standing in front of the 25 or 15 in-person students. So it's just a matter of, it's tough to balance both at one time. And we feel like this would help.
Okay, I have several questions regarding about how this will make it easier for teachers. Can we maybe explain how we feel that this is going to make it more doable for our teachers and not relieve them of some of the stress that they're experiencing right now?
We think it will, because again, just the focus on one, but at the forefront of that is what's best for students. Our student achievement data is concerning right now. There are some students that are doing very well with flexible e-learning, but there are some that are really struggling to engage. And the other piece is elementary students, specifically those primary grades. If you're a parent that's trying to hold down a job and working from home while also being a teacher for your 7-year-old and your 9-year-old, that gets really hard to balance. So, or if you're a babysitter or a childcare provider with school-age flexible students in your childcare center, it's hard to balance all of that. So if we can eliminate all of those options and focus and provide people the opportunity to just focus on one instructional model, we think that it, in the end, is going to benefit students.
And I know we've been trying to explain this, we've said it many times, but I still have more questions about why we can't continue to offer the flexible model. Like why can't we have a student that's in the OLC for some of it and then potentially come face-to-face for others, or they're in the OLC and then we also offer chances for them to do other flexible classes. So I think it's worthy of reinforcing and repeating again.
We can't sustain it. It's as simple as that. Our numbers of vacancies as it relates to absenteeism for a lot of different reasons is increasing. And if we can't sustain the model that we're currently operating under, we'll be forced to close. It's as simple as that.
From a secondary perspective, so if I'm a U.S. history teacher and I have 5 sections of 25 to 30 students, I have all of those kids in my classes, but if I have 75% of them that come to school and the other 25% are flexible e-learning, it's really difficult to try to engage and connect with those students on that flexible e-learning. So Cory mentioned it. We have teachers that are teaching full day with kids in session, and then there's another whole group of kids, and there's simply not enough time or capacity to be able to connect with those kids. And we're seeing our achievement is very concerning, and it is completely just a time issue for teachers to be able to connect with all those kids.
We originally did this because we wanted options. We wanted options for families and kids. We thought that the flexible e-learning component would phase out. We thought those would be students and parents that were apprehensive to come to school because of the issues with COVID, and a couple things were going to happen. Quite frankly, we were going to shut down as a district because of COVID, or we would be successful and those students would come back into school. That was the whole idea behind that. It wasn't necessarily set up for the whole year. That's what the OLC is for. So we're really offering three different options. Most school districts aren't, they're only offering two. They've only been offering the two. And so what we're finding is that whole capacity issue. And again, I'm repeating myself, but if we don't change something, we likely will be shut down earlier than not. Quite frankly, I don't think we'll make it to Thanksgiving if we don't change something.
I got a question about reading. Obviously, that's a big concern. Understanding that we're using a lot of technology. There's a lot of screen time. There's synchronous connections. What are we doing to try and address that? And what are our thoughts about reading? I think it's mainly an elementary question.
Yep. So we've incorporated some tools to help our reading teachers and our classroom teachers teach reading virtually for students that are in that flexi learning environment. We're still continuing to learn more. We're doing the very best we can, but again, it would be a combination of some synchronous stuff. We've got some digital resources that align with our current curriculum, that align with our current instructional materials, and we're continuing to monitor those and increase capacity with resources to help teachers so they've got tons of tools in their toolbox to do whatever they need to do to keep kids engaged and keep them focused on reading, because literacy is essential for everything. So our reading teachers and our classroom teachers are going to continue to try to enhance that and get better at it. And again, if they can focus on one model, we think that that's going to benefit our kids in reading.
Good question from a parent regarding academic honesty. When so much is done online, there's a lot of potential for copying and pasting and cheating to occur. What are we doing to try and prevent that, or what are we doing differently in this current environment?
Part is many teachers are looking at different ways to assess students, and through means that, because they're not going to be able to monitor all those kinds of assessments. So we're looking at different ways for students to demonstrate their learning through projects, making sure that they are emphasizing constantly that the academic honesty policies that we have in place, and then also just how dangerous it can be for students to be dishonest and how that can reflect a grade in credit.
We're nearing the end of the time that we've scheduled for this webinar. I think there's one last very important question from a parent. They're working, they have young children at home. What are they supposed to do for the 3 weeks that we're asking them to do complete virtual instruction? And I know we've talked about it before, but that's probably a good way to close out our questions for tonight. We'll save some time for some closing remarks.
That is the most significant issue with the virtual component altogether. It's just that, again, we've talked a little bit about creating our homework centers, if I may, within our buildings, working with the Boys and Girls Club, as well as the YMCA. We have our own staff that have issues as well. We have staff that are teaching that have their own children that'll be at home. So we're going to be addressing that as well. And I know people want to know what the plan is so they could so they can plan for that. That's in the works. We will get that information out soon. But the thought is that we would utilize space in our buildings and utilize our educational assistants to not only supervise the spaces in the area, but to actually assist in the learning process for those families that flat out don't have options for daycare. And we don't want to put people in situations where they have to choose between being home with their children or going to work, because people have to go to work. I get that. So we will create that. We'll get more information out, and that'll come out. The best I can say is soon.
Great. Okay. We only have a few minutes remaining. I guess I would say that I know Craig, you just answered and spoke about that very important topic. Connie and Cory, do you have anything that you'd like to say in the final minutes that we have to talk to parents? Anything to wrap things up?
One thing I'd just like to say is thanks for your patience. Thanks for your understanding and your support of our teachers in our district. It's been a pretty good start, but we're at this point because we feel like we could do even better. And we can even do better for kids as well as staff. So if you have additional questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We'll do our best to answer these other questions that are on here. But specifically, if you need something addressed immediately, don't be afraid to reach out.
Yes, I agree. I think we're just doing our absolute best to provide really quality learning experiences for our students. We're doing our best to maintain and take care of a really quality teaching staff so that they can continue to provide quality instruction. And if you do have questions and concerns, and I know that this is going to be a change at semester from what it looked like first semester, please reach out with questions, concerns. We do want to hear from you. We may not be able to give you the answers that you might want or might not have answers yet, but please do reach out.
I'd like to say a few things real briefly. Number one, if I didn't ask your question, had your question fielded tonight, my apologies. I did the best I can between Q&A and chat and different screens. Again, reach out. We'll try and get your question answered. I'd also like to say, as we move into this virtual period and also moving forward, we will do everything we can to support families at home with technology. If you can't get connected online, please let us know. We'll do everything we can to get you online. If you have problems logging in, problems using anything, you can call 345-5511 Monday through Friday during the day, and we will help you. So please don't forget that. Almost at the end, would you like to say anything else?
Yes, thanks for attending this evening. I understand that you're frustrated. We're frustrated. We're working for your children, and I know we're all parents in this room. We all have kids as well, so we could certainly put ourselves in your situation. Please know that we're doing everything that we can in terms of making good decisions. What's challenging is this is new. It's new for all of us. And school districts are scrambling around the state, much like we are in terms of shifting a little bit. But please know that we are doing everything that we can to ensure the best learning opportunities for your children. And that includes their safety as well as their mental being. So again, thanks so much. And please contact me if you would choose to email or you can call my office. Thank you.